Do we owe our kids an apology for being born? My grandparents lived back in the 1860s. For reasons nobody could understand, they couldn't make a baby. It was like nature had rejected them. But they didn't give up. Over and over again they tried. Hours of exhausting, back-breaking efforts. You know what I'm talking about. They were doing what humans and animals all over the world do every day without any thought, and yet they had to struggle. And when they finally succeeded, boom, a baby. Everyone celebrated. But seriously, dogs pop out litters of pups all the time without even thinking about it. Is that a success too? Then my father oozed into the world. His first act? Crying, screaming. From day one, he was unhappy. And my grandparents, their lives were already hard, but this made it harder. No sleep, just constant attention to this crying, shitting, pissing thing that needed everything. They gave up their freedom, their sleep, their lives, a never-ending cycle. When he was 2, some sickness hit him. My grandparents sold everything they had, their heirlooms, their memories all gone, just to try and save him, and he survived. But at what cost? At 5, he had a toothache from hell because his teeth were growing in, and tooth abscess exploded. His teeth, the school, the fights, the constant colds and lice. Meanwhile, my grandparents were getting older, weaker, disappearing in the background of my father's life. He had all the right to grow, to bloom. My father went to college. He felt so entitled and important. Their suffering did not matter. At 20, my father hated his poor family. All the sacrifice, all the effort. For what? To bring him into a world where he had to struggle. He cursed them secretly for bringing him here. Then, at 23, my father met my mom. They loved each other. Or maybe it was just lust. Addicted to each other's bodies, desperate for that brief release. 5 months later, the cracks started. Fights, arguments. They couldn't even talk for 5 minutes without something blowing up, but they kept going. Why? Probably just addiction. Then through that dirty, fleshy encounter, my father's sperm, that wriggling tide of filth and false promises, invaded my mother's womb. A fucking cosmic lottery, a roll of the dice with suffering, and I was born. My mother suffered before, and during birth. The pain was too much, and she died as soon as I came out. So I emerged from her womb, covered in sadness. As if I knew this world was shit, my father, wrecked with grief, devoted his life to me. But here's the kicker. He fed me, he cared for me, but when I got sick, he was drained. I had tooth abscess erupting inside my teeth at the age of 5. Exactly what he had. The cycle repeating. At 15, bipolar disorder hit me like a truck. All those important genes set by a generation before, nothing we could do about it. Neither his fault nor mine. The world gave me one more shit when I was also diagnosed with diabetes 1. More money, more suffering, 4 suicide attempts. I never asked to be born, but they wouldn't let me die. They were forcing me to live. I should be able to decide to die. I went to college, fell in love, but never made a baby. Never got married. What if I had made a baby? Same damn story would happen to my child. I loved someone, but they didn't love me back. Someone loved me, but I didn't love them. Depression is eating me alive. I'm suffering. Just like Van Gogh, who went crazy, I am going crazy too. Look at this story. Look at your life. Look at your parents' life. It's all the same old story. So, if everything is repetitive and boring, why do we keep popping out babies? Why? For more suffering. Let's rewind 400 years. Same shit, different clothes. A baby boy is born, gets sick, cries, grows up, learns enough to make money, goes through hardships. The most basic bitch or basic dude earns money, gets a partner, spawns another generation, and spends his life grinding. Marriage, babies, and then constant caring for the kids. And then finally, after 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years, they die. Women's lives are the same mostly. That's the blueprint for pretty much everyone. Through history, the story is almost exactly the same, no matter who you are. We come to this world, struggle with everyday life, and create the illusion that we are strong through hardship. Go to college, earn a living, get married, have kids, take care of them, and then die. The same damn thing will happen to our children. Does this make sense? Is it enough? And here's the truth I've come to understand. We are all here because of a selfish decision, a decision made without our consent. No one asked us if we wanted to exist, to face this endless cascade of pain, to suffer through toothaches and heartbreak, sickness and death. It was never a choice for us. Have you ever really thought about the life you're living? Stop and ask yourself, was it worth it? Did you ever wish you could have chosen to opt out before it all started? I'm not here to judge the choices you've made or demonize parents who only wanted to create life. Maybe they believed in hope. Maybe they believed in love. But I'm here to call it what it is, a gamble. When we have kids, we're gambling with lives that haven't started. We're gambling with pain, with trauma, and with suffering that our innocent children will one day endure. And for what? To feed the cycle, to cling to the illusion that new life makes the world better. And sure, some people will argue that life can be happy, but here's the thing, happiness cannot exist without suffering. One does not come without the other. No one escapes this unscathed. So I'll leave you with one last thought. Do we owe our kids an apology for being born? Do we, if you plan to bring another life into this mess, think about this first? Why? Is it truly for them, or is it about you? Your needs, your fears, your longing for purpose? Because until we stop and question ourselves, we're dooming the next generation to repeat the same mistakes, to live through the same torment, to carry the same burdens we've carried. Maybe, just maybe, the kindest thing we could do is to break the chain. Do we owe our kids an apology for bringing them into this world, a world filled with suffering, uncertainty, and inevitable death? This isn't an easy question to ask. It's painful. But philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer, Sophocles, and Samuel Beckett have spent their lives grappling with exactly this idea. Welcome to a conversation about life, birth, and the decision not to create life. A philosophy called antinatalism. It's uncomfortable, and yet it's incredibly thought-provoking. Let's explore it. Schopenhauer's Doom, Philosophy of Suffering. Let's begin with one of the harshest critics of life itself, the German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. For Schopenhauer, life wasn't a gift. Rather, it's a relentless cycle of suffering. He had one principle pinned to his view of existence, the will to live. According to him, this invisible force compels all living beings to carry on, struggle, and reproduce, endlessly clawing for survival, but rarely stopping to think if any of it truly makes us happy. Think about it. Why do we chase money, relationships, status, and even children? The common answer is to be happy. But if you pause and really analyze it, how often does that happiness last? Schopenhauer says it doesn't. His famous quote sums up his perspective. Life swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. You see, Schopenhauer believed suffering wasn't accidental. It's essential to life. Imagine this. A hungry man suffers until he eats, but when he finally eats, his satisfaction is short-lived. Soon, boredom sets in. That's when the cycle begins again. He concluded that bringing new life into this endless loop of misery is morally questionable. And for those of you who think suffering can be avoided as long as life is good, he simply asks, can you escape the inevitability of death? Isn't even a happy life laced with fear and loss? Sophocles and the idea that never being is best. Now let's move from Schopenhauer's bleak 19th century Germany to ancient Greece. The playwright Sophocles shared a powerful and darkly poetic take on life. In his play, Oedipus at Colonus, He wrote, "Never to have been born is best, but once born, a quick return to non-being is next." Think about the depth of that statement. Never to have been born is best. Sophocles was reflecting on the inherent tragedy of the human condition. He lived in a time of chaos, wars, plagues, and political turmoil, and he recognized that no matter how much we accomplish or how far humanity seems to progress, life is ultimately marked more by suffering than joy. Picture this: a baby taking their first steps. We see it as hopeful, but to thinkers like Sophocles, the child is stepping into a lifetime of worries, pain, heartbreak, aging, and of course, inevitable death. Antinatalists, borrowing from ideas like Sophocles', argue, if life consists mainly of suffering, isn't it cruel to force existence upon someone who never asked for it? Now, you might argue that suffering builds character. It makes us strong. But Sophocles would simply reply, why create someone who needs to endure suffering in the first place? Is that fair? Is it necessary? These are questions we often avoid, but antinatalists confront head-on. Samuel Beckett, the absurdity of birth and life. And then there's Samuel Beckett, the Irish playwright who took this bleak view of life and turned it into art that leaves you unsettled. You might know his famous play, Waiting for Godot. It's often called a play where nothing happens. Two characters endlessly wait for someone, Godot, who never comes. Beckett's work reflects his belief in the absurdity of life. Imagine waking up every day, going through the motions, eating, working, sleeping, knowing full well that in the end, none of it truly matters. Existential, futile. Beckett famously wrote, "They give birth astride of a grave. The light gleams. An instant, then it's night once more." Beckett's comment is a poetic reminder of how fleeting life is. For antinatalists, this begs a critical question. Why continue to bring life into a world where existence is a brief and futile struggle? To them, creating a child is less about giving the gift of life and more about introducing another person to the absurdity of existence, a paradox where we crave purpose but are faced with meaninglessness at every turn. The ethics of birth. Let me tell you a story. Imagine two parents full of hope choosing to have a child. They imagine their child's first steps, their first words, the pride in their achievements. It's a beautiful dream, but what they don't imagine is the other side. The sleepless nights, the child struggles with self-doubt, potential heartbreaks, illness, or even severe tragedies. These parents do it out of love, but the child never asked for this life. Antinatalists argue that choosing to have a child is inherently selfish. Because while parents often focus on the joy they'll experience from having kids, they overlook the suffering a child may endure. And remember, every life ends. Parents bring children into the world knowing full well they're also gifting them death. Do we owe an apology? So, do we owe our kids an apology for bringing them into the world? Antinatalists like Schopenhauer, Sophocles, and Beckett would say yes, because life is defined by suffering, futility, and an end no one escapes. But does that mean life isn't worth living? This is where we enter the gray area. While antinatalists argue for the moral imperative to avoid creating life, most people find purpose in existence despite its pains. Maybe it's love, creating art, or simply experiencing the beauty of nature. Maybe it's hope that things can get better. At the end of the day, the question of whether life is worth living or worth creating is a deeply personal one. But thinkers like Schopenhauer, Sophocles, and Beckett remind us to think critically about a choice we often take for granted. So now I ask you, what do you think? Is bringing someone into the world truly an act of love? Or is it a gamble with someone else's suffering? Would it be better never to have been born? A brighter perspective, living and growing in the world we're in. You might be thinking, wow, this world is so dark. What now? Should we never get married, never have kids, never do anything? Are we just supposed to give up on everything? That's understandable. It's a lot to take in. But here's the thing. We shouldn't see the world like this. Despite its challenges, the world isn't an unbearable void of despair. You might also wonder, okay, I'm here now because of my parents' decision. I didn't ask to be born, but here I am. What should I do now? Or what if I genuinely want to have children? How do I approach such a life-altering decision? Let's take those one at a time. For the first question, what do we do now that we're in the world? That's a massive and meaningful question, and we're going to discuss that in detail in upcoming videos. Philosophers, thinkers, guides, they all have profound insights we can learn from. So if that's something you're interested in, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you're tuned in when those videos drop. Those discussions are crucial for navigating life with purpose, even amid challenges. But here's a starting point right now. We need to learn how to live. Really, learn how to live. Because most of us haven't mastered that yet. Humanity as a whole, we're like upgraded versions of the wild. We've tamed ourselves, but not fully. So much of the world's problems, our relationships, our unhappiness, our regrets, stem from the fact that we don't know how to truly live as genuine, fulfilled, and interconnected human beings. And until we figure that out, it's going to be hard to build a world worth thriving in. Which brings us to the second question. What if I still want to have a child? Well, here's the truth. It's complicated. Maybe you'll create an entire world of joy for your child, but that's not a guarantee. Raising a child is about so much more than just providing for their material needs or loving them. It's about preparing yourself first. Because if you don't know how to live properly, how can you teach your children how to? Think about it. If you don't know how to weld, you can't teach someone how to weld. If you don't know how to cook, you can't teach someone how to cook. And if you don't know how to live, how to navigate relationships, handle stress, love yourself, or plan your life effectively, you're going to struggle to teach any of that to your kids. Truth is, not everyone is eligible to be a parent. And that's not just about resources or being a good person. It's about mastering life as best as you can before passing on your habits, your knowledge, and yes, even your genes to another human being. After all, bad habits, unresolved issues, and genetic conditions often get passed on, like ripples through generations. So before even considering bringing someone into the world, focus on creating a good life for yourself first. Learn how to communicate, plan, build relationships, and manage your own life with care. Once you've truly learned how to live and grow, then you're in a much better place to guide another life through this world. And yes, we'll discuss this in even more depth in a future video. How to prepare yourself to create and raise a life responsibly and lovingly. But for now, here's the takeaway. The world may be flawed, but it's still filled with the potential for learning and growth. The people around you and yourself need to unlearn harmful patterns and relearn how to live fully, humanly, before we can expect the world to truly improve. And if you want to have kids one day, remember, it's not just about wanting a child. It's about preparing yourself to give them the best life possible, starting with becoming the kind of person you'd want to have as a parent. So take a look at your own life, at your own growth, and think about this deeply. Don't despair. Instead, let's see this as an opportunity, a way to break unhealthy cycles for future generations and create better lives for ourselves and others. Let's learn how to live together properly so that one day bringing new life into the world won't just be about love or survival, but about giving someone a genuine chance at joy and fulfillment. And for everything else, stay tuned. Thank you for joining this deep dive into antinatalism, a philosophy that doesn't shy away from life's hardest questions. If you found this thought-provoking, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, keep questioning the world around you.